Hello my dears, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and tonight I've got a spooky type of video to share with you guys. Tonight I'm going to take you on a trip back to my home province of Newfoundland. If you've been around here for a while, you know that's where I'm from. It's a east coast island in Canada. And tonight we're going to be talking about the St. John the Baptist Anglican Cathedral located in St. John's, Newfoundland. St. John's is the oldest city in North America. It's sometimes called the City of Legends, just because back home storytelling is such a big part of the culture. Sharing stories, telling stories, passing stories down through generations. Even today, you know, in 2020, it's still something that is such a big part of everyday life. And I just love talking about the ghost stories from back home. I hope someday soon to get to travel back home. Of course, with everything going on right now, no one's really traveling too much, but someday I hope to take you guys with me back home. Maybe we can explore some of these places that we've talked about, because this isn't my first video talking about haunted places in Newfoundland. There's so many when you Google like haunted houses, haunted ghost stories of Newfoundland. So many come up. Anyway, I thought this one was very interesting because St. John's is home to many beautiful churches. There's going to be this one, which we're talking about tonight, the St. John the Baptist Anglican Cathedral. And the one we're going to talk about tonight, I'm going to give you a bit of the history so you can see kind of how it got from its humble beginnings to the church that you see right here now, the way it exists today. And it's just so gorgeous. So let's get into a bit of the history. I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to read it to you just to make sure I get it entirely correct. So it says, the Anglican Cathedral of St. John the Baptist is the oldest Anglican cathedral in Canada, located at 16 Church Hill in the historic downtown area of the Old City. The cathedral has a long and storied past. It's not known exactly what year the first Anglican church was built in St. John's, but it's known that it was sometime before 1699. It was in that year that the Anglican parish in St. John's was founded, in the petition made to the Bishop of London by the Anglican residents of St. John's to establish a parish there. They also requested assistance to rebuild their church. The building had been destroyed during one of the many battles between the French and the English for control of North America. Over the years, there were at least 6 wooden churches built at the site where the Anglican church, the cathedral, now stands today. So they tried 6 times with wooden structures to build this church. And it says here that all of which were destroyed during these battles. And those that weren't destroyed by war or fire, they fell victim to the very harsh weather of Newfoundland. Because here's the thing, it gets cold in the winter, of course. Not as cold temperature-wise as it gets up here where I am now in Alberta, but it still gets very cold in Newfoundland. And the thing is along with the cold comes a lot of, it's an island, so of course it's very humid there. So I just feel like the humidity plus the cold, plus the sleet and the rain and the snow that they get all winter. Up here in Alberta, we get to a point where it's too cold to snow, whereas I feel like back home, it doesn't get to that point. And so therefore, it's just kind of pummeled with snow, especially in the late winter, early spring. They get a ton then. So it says the first stone church was begun in 1843, but little beyond the laying of the cornerstone was accomplished. Then in 1847, the project was taken over by the second Bishop of Newfoundland, Edward Field, under whose leadership construction of the present cathedral was started. So that was in 1847. The nave, which served as the entire church for 35 years, was completed in 1850. The transepts, chancel, and sanctuary were begun in 1880, and the cathedral was completed in 1885. Then unfortunately, the new cathedral, though it certainly wasn't completely destroyed, It was severely damaged during the Great Fire in St. John's, and that took place in, I believe, 1892. During the Great Fire, almost the entire city burnt to the ground. It's wild. They pretty much had to start from scratch and rebuild this city at the end of the 1800s. And so the cathedral was taken by that. In fact, the damage to the cathedral was so extensive that it took 10 years to repair. So then here it says, the grounds to the south of the building between the cathedral and Duckworth Street contain the Anglican cemetery. And we're going to get to this cemetery because there's some creepy things happening in this cemetery. But anyway, though most of the headstones and grave markers are long gone, those of some of Newfoundland's more famous citizens, such as Sir James Pearl and the Honorable William Carson, MD, do remain. There are some 6,000 people believed to be buried in this cemetery by the church. Many without ever having the benefit of a grave marker, and for whom no records exist. And I know there's a haunted walk that takes place in St. John's, and that's where the walk begins, at this cathedral. And the next time I'm home, I would love to go on that walk and start there and get to see the church up close, sort of from the perspective of someone who's really into this kind of stuff. But yeah, I've always found that so creepy, in that for nearly 6,000 people laid to rest in that cemetery, they're unmarked graves, and there's no records. There's no records that exist to tell people who those people were. And that just leaves you with such a, or at least for me, it just leaves me with such a strange feeling, like in my heart and in my gut. Just like, it's almost like they didn't exist because there's no record of them. And it's been over 100 years now, so, their families are no doubt long gone. So it's like the people who would remember who was in these graves are probably long gone. So it says, it is perhaps little wonder that a place with so much history would be the focus of so many tales of the supernatural, right? Like, it just lends itself to it. One of the most famous ghost stories associated with the cathedral concerns one of the workmen, a young stone worker that had been killed when he fell from the scaffolding during construction at the time. I feel like so often with buildings that have been around for a long time, there's always that one story of some poor young man who was killed while building it. Apparently, the worker was unable to leave with the job unfinished, as a number of his co-workers reported having seen him around the job site after his death. Even more startling is the fact that he may appear in a group photo, and I'm going to put that photo right here now. See if you can see it. So after the nave was completed in 1850, a number of the workmen involved, dressed in their finest clothes, and I believe a lot of these men were Freemasons, and they dedicated their time to come and to get this job done. And so once they were done, they came in their finest clothes, ready to take a photo in front of this beautiful church that they had just completed building. They gathered on Duckworth Street, which, if you live in St. John's, of course, is a very well-known, popular street, in front of the cathedral for a group photo to commemorate a job well done, no doubt. They were unaware at the time that they were not alone. When the picture was processed, it contained the image of the deceased man still in his work clothes, posing alongside his co-workers, which just sends chills right through me. Another well-known story that involves the cathedral cemetery is, it was said that one man's apparent unwillingness to be buried there at church. So apparently, as the legend goes, the body of a foreigner, perhaps a merchant sailor from one of the many ships that made St. John's a regular port of call, because that's one of the things, especially way back in the day, but even today, being at the very tip of North America, St. John's is very often, especially for boats, but even for planes, a place to sort of dock. It's a port of call where you can get off, stretch your legs, gather up resources that you need, and then to keep going to America, to wherever else you're going. And St. John's has long been that. So it's saying this man was discovered in a downtown lane sometime in the late 1800s. Unable to determine the man's identity or where he had come from, it was decided that he would have to be buried in a local cemetery. The Anglican Cathedral Cemetery was chosen as the place. So once all preparation and due ceremony was complete, the men began to lower the casket down into the grave, and then legend has it that once it was about halfway back down, they began to hear knocking sounds coming from the hole they had dug, where they were now lowering this body. And it says partway through the process, they heard a knocking noise coming from the pit. They quickly shoveled out the grave and removed the casket. A doctor was called on to examine the body. He determined that the man was indeed dead. So the casket was once again exhumed, and the body once again examined by the doctor, and once again pronounced dead. Once it was lowered back into the grave, the process of burying it was once more begun. The knocking started for a third time. The doctor who had remained at the gravesite refused to let the men bring the body back up. He was like, you know what, no, we're done here. I can't declare him any deader than I already have. And eventually the knocking just stopped. And so the thing that always really creeps me out about it, because I had heard that story before, and the way that it goes is that to this day, if you are walking in the cemetery at night, or by the cemetery, or around the cemetery, or anything like that, sometimes you can hear the knocking coming from that grave. And that's just enough to make me never go anywhere near that church once it's dark, especially not alone. Anyway, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this sort of quick little video. That Anglican church, I always think about it, because first of all, it's just aesthetically so beautiful. And I just always really liked the tales that circulated about it. So I got a lot of info on that from an article, and I'll put the entire article in the comments, in the description below. Anyway, you guys, I hope you're having a great week. I hope just everything is going well for you, and I will see you on Friday. Bye, guys.